Why do you feel so exhausted when you're running your business? Why do you feel burnout? A lot of it isn't what you think it is. Like, yes, the tasks or the hours per week or those things can be a challenge. If you're doing too many hours a week, if you're doing too much and not replenishing yourself, then you can feel worn down and burn out. But a lot of it comes down to how natural and normal and yourself and authentic can you be in the day to day of this role that you're playing. We've got, like, if you think about it, we wear masks all the time. If we, depending on what your people skills are and what that looks like, if you go talk to a certain person, you're going to have a slightly different approach and personality and mask that you're wearing versus another. Like, if you think back to if you go back to your hometown and you feel yourself revert back a little bit to that version of yourself that you were then, and then you go into some other environment where you're on your sports team or the gym, right? You've got a different persona that you have there, and then you've got a client facing persona that you have. And a lot of times what's taking energy and isn't necessary is putting on a mask or stepping into this role that we think, like, we feel isn't us. And so back, a while back, I had a big challenge with the authenticity of it, of certain roles that I did in sales roles. And it was always a thing of like, okay, I've got to stop being me. Like, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to get ready, I'm going to get myself into momentum for the day, and then I'm going to put on this mask and put on this outfit, and then I'm going to show up as this role and this thing that I've created. And that thing is not me, and so it's going to take energy from me. And in doing so, I've got to put on my self-protection where people can't see through that, and I go and put on the cape and do the things all day. And then I get so exhausted when I come back home and I take off the cape and I can finally be me again. And and this depends on your personality type, but this can be slight or it can be very extreme. And for me, it was very extreme. And the mask that I was wearing felt so different. The role I was showing up as was so different than me, so I thought. And it took so much out of me, and I would burn out in a third of the time or a fourth of the time that I do now. And it still can happen if you do too much over too short a time. Like, burnout happens, and it usually means that you aren't balanced in terms of things that feed you and things that give you energy and things that excite you and things that feel authentic. And so if you're in that phase where you got this role that you're playing that isn't you at all, it's kind of a bind that we put ourselves in. Like, okay, I've shown up as this in this role. Now I can't be just me, because what happens if I show up as just me, and just me isn't accepted? And if you reject my role, that's fine. I can still walk away with a little bit of pride preserved. If you reject me, if I take off the mask and I show up in my natural, authentic way, and then you reject that, and then you push, into that, and, that isn't good enough for whatever the thing is, now that's me on the line. That's me, that I put myself out there. So then when that happens, I'm going to reject myself more than likely. And so it's so dangerous. And yet, if we self-protect, and we show up in this role where it isn't us, we die the slow death of inauthenticity, and we don't show up as who we are, so we can't gain energy from it. It's taking energy from us constantly, and we're self-preserving to create a slow, drawn-out death instead of what we can't handle sometimes, which is just being ourselves in the role. And the reality is there's some roles that may not be a fit if you just are yourself. Yet most of the time that's perceptual. It's generally not the case that the role is going to be totally incompatible with you. It just may be how you approach it is totally incompatible. And it's the perceptual part of, well, I can't be me and do this thing, right? And that could be a lot of things. You could be projecting, lack of worth or self-doubt or being unlovable or being bad or whatever the beliefs are deep underneath that could be projected out. And so like, well, I have to be something other than me because just me isn't good enough. And I have to step into this role so that I feel, or so that I'm perceived as good enough because I'm not good enough by myself. And that's creating the burnout. Like, it's so much better to say, okay, this is me. I'm going to be authentic in this and take it or leave it and it not work out. And then you move on to find the fit of the business or the thing that does fit for you, which doesn't happen as often as you would think. But it's so much better to have that happen and be authentic about it, because you will then be on the way to finding something that does give you energy when you show up as yourself and you're successful in it. Like if you're forcing it and being successful in something that's not natural, that is going to create pain over time. It's just tolerable and intolerable until it's not. And then you just can't handle it. And you burn out or you implode or you have a crisis. And, for people that are adaptable and people that can step in and play a lot of roles, then it's even more the risk. Like for me, I could step in and it may take most of me to just get through a day doing it, but I can step into, this other type of role. And it was horrible for the experience of it, but I was showing up as successful, and I would get accolades and awards, and it would seem good to other people, and I would create success, but at the cost of myself, right? I'm trading a piece of me away at a time, and I'm beating into myself that I am whatever negative thing that I believe, because as I continue to wear that mask, I continue to strengthen the presupposition that I'm not good enough or that I'm bad, and I hide myself more and more. And obviously the body doesn't like that, the mind doesn't like that, the emotions don't like that. Like it just creates compounding problems over time, and we get stuck in this bind where then it's been so long we've done this role and worn this mask that we cannot step out of it. Otherwise we could lose the whole business, or we could crumble, or whatever that looks like. And yet, is dying a slow death by inauthenticity over time really that much better? Like maybe you can stack up enough money and maybe you can create enough success to get some freedom before you totally implode. But I've seen a lot of people that don't. And generally when they implode, or when something really tragic in their life happens, or a loved one dies, or something that the pain becomes so much that it gets dark and scary for them, that's when they start to show up for themselves and realize, like, I don't have a choice. And one of the gifts that I was given that I now see as a gift is that I didn't have a choice. Like it got really dark and really scary, and I don't know what would have happened ultimately had I not faced myself and realized, like, I don't have a choice but to figure out how to be more authentic and be more of me in this role and in anything I do. And ultimately I got to a point where I had to choose myself, or I had or it would be chosen for me that mental and emotional health, and I would basically completely collapse, and and that could have gone a bunch of different directions had it happened. And so I was given the gift of not being able to tolerate that long term, like a lot of successful people. A lot of people I've worked with can tolerate that for 20 years or 10 years, and I could tolerate it for 3-4 years. And so when that added up and accumulated, I went internal, and I was able to figure out, okay, these are the things, like, I have to choose me and I have to show up in these ways. And that's what keeps me from betraying myself when I'm showing up in this role, in whatever the role may be. And then I have to set boundaries around that. And this is the box that I'll be in. And outside of that box, I won't do that role. And this is what feels authentic to me, and a process, process of self-discovery. And yet a lot of people can tolerate the pain. It's not as much. They're not as introspective. They're not as sensitive to that, and so they just slowly whittle away at themselves until they get to a point where there's nothing left but this role, and we don't even know how to find our way back to us, and we don't know what's authentic, and we don't know, like, what's a hobby. I don't know what I like to do, and I don't even know who I am, and I have no idea why I even got up today and I'm doing any of the things I'm doing. Like, that's what starts to show up when we push ourselves and like stamp ourselves into a little cookie cutter shape so that we can show up for other people and do this role to the way that we think it needs to be done. Like, it's that whole thing where it's I am what I think you think I am. And so we're guessing at what other people perceive us to be, and guessing what we would need to be perceived as to be successful in the role. And then we just squish ourselves into that role inauthentically, and we can lie to the world, and we can show up in that role, and it's not bad. It's just not totally authentic to us, and we show up that way to the role, and we lie to the world about it, and basically a harmless lie, but it's harmful to us because we're lying to ourselves about that role that we're playing. And we think, like, okay, well, I can just do this, or I can do this for X amount of time, and that presupposes we can't just be us, and it presupposes we can't be authentic in the role, and we aren't choosing to step into the courage of, wherever this takes me, I'm going to be a little bit more of myself today. I'm going to be a little bit more authentic today. I'm going to be a little bit more of who I really am, or I'm going to start to figure out who I am today. I'm going to spend a little bit of time with myself. I'm going to tolerate just a little bit of silence in the shower, or in the quiet moment in the morning, or between meetings. And I'm going to tolerate that space to see who I am. I'm going to try out some hobbies. I'm going to do something different to start to connect with who I am. Because people are on a spectrum with that. Maybe they're already authentic all the time, and if they are, then probably don't need this conversation. And if they're all the way on the other spectrum, end of the spectrum is total suffering, total agony, total pain, have no idea who we are, and no idea where to start. And the place to start is get to know who you are. And if you know who you are, then start to show up in the ways that you know you need to show up, so that things add energy and give you energy and add value to you. And so as we do this, you step through it, and you get to the point where you can be you in the roles, and you make sure when you take a role that you can, within your own value set, fit in the role and fit it in a way that's authentic, and fit in a way that gives you energy, and go into the business that gives you energy with the people that give you energy. And if you're not there, then shift the way the business looks to make it so. And if you don't think it's possible, then you're probably incorrect. And yet that's the thing to challenge. That's the belief, like, well, it's not possible for me, or it's not possible in this industry, or I have to keep showing up this way. Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but you will never know unless you actually start to challenge that and push that. And so if you think it's just burnout because you've done too much over too short of time, it's probably not just that. There's a lot more going on under the surface that you may be terrified to peel back and look at because of what it might mean about you. And yet, if you don't choose that, you're choosing death by 1,000 cuts. If you don't choose to look at it, you're choosing to have the slow and painful process where it accumulates and accumulates, and you completely fall apart. Or you could be the exception, and you could make enough money quickly enough that you don't totally fall apart. Is that really the life that you want to live?